The air crackled with anticipation, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Tonight was the night of the Great Shift, a sacred ritual marking the transition into the deepest part of winter, a night where every member of the Silver Moon Pack would shed their human skin and embrace the wolf within. Bonfires blazed, casting flickering shadows on the expectant faces gathered in the clearing. Each year, it was a spectacle of raw power and primal unity, a breathtaking display of the pack's collective strength. But for Alara, it was a stark reminder of her own otherness, a painful chasm separating her from the only family she had ever known. She stood on the periphery, her human heart aching with a longing she couldn't articulate. Around her, young werewolves, barely on the cusp of adulthood, trembled with excitement, their eyes glowing with nascent power. They whispered and joked, sharing nervous glances as the moon climbed higher in the inky sky. Alara watched them, her fingers tracing the worn leather of the tunic she wore, a garment identical to those of her packmates, yet somehow, on her, it felt like a costume. The transformation began subtly, a ripple of muscle beneath skin, a sharpening of features, a glint of feral hunger in the eyes. Then, it exploded in a cacophony of cracking bones and guttural roars as the werewolves surrendered to their animalistic instincts. Massive wolves, their fur the color of moonlight and shadow, prowled the clearing, their eyes burning with an untamed fire. They circled the bonfires, their howls echoing through the ancient forest, a symphony of wildness that both thrilled and terrified Alara. But she could only watch, a silent observer in a world she could never fully inhabit. Alara was an anomaly, a human girl raised among werewolves. Orphaned as an infant, she had been found abandoned near the pack's territory and taken in by the pack's healer, a kind woman named Morwen, who saw a spark of resilience in the child's wide, frightened eyes. Morwen raised Alara as her own, teaching her the ways of the forest, the secrets of herbs and healing, and the ancient lore of the Silver Moon Pack. Alara grew into a compassionate and resourceful young woman, deeply connected to the natural world. She possessed a quiet strength, a gentle spirit, and an unwavering loyalty to the pack that had taken her in. Yet, despite her best efforts, she remained an outsider, forever separated by her inability to shift, her lack of the wolf blood that coursed through the veins of her packmates. Her appearance further accentuated this difference. While the werewolves were tall and powerfully built, with sharp features and piercing eyes, Alara was small and slender, with soft brown hair and gentle, hazel eyes that reflected her kind nature. Her very presence was a constant reminder of her human frailty in a world of supernatural power. The pack, while generally accepting of Alara, harbored a growing unease, fueled by the traditionalist Beta, Reland. He was a formidable warrior, respected for his strength and unwavering adherence to the old ways. But beneath his gruff exterior lurked a deep-seated prejudice against Alara, whom he saw as a weakness, a liability to the pack. He subtly stoked the flames of discontent, whispering doubts about her loyalty and ability to protect them from their enemies. He questioned her place among them, arguing that she could never truly understand the needs of the pack or defend their territory against threats. "She is human," he would say, his voice laced with disdain. "She is weak. She cannot shift. How can we rely on her when danger comes?" His words, carefully chosen and strategically placed, began to erode the pack's acceptance of Alara, creating a palpable tension that hung heavy in the air, a shadow threatening to consume her fragile sense of belonging. 667 words. Reland's insidious campaign gained momentum, subtly poisoning the pack's perception of Alara. He wasn't overt in his attacks, preferring to plant seeds of doubt, whispers in the shadows, and carefully constructed scenarios that highlighted her human limitations. He'd accidentally assign her tasks that required shifting, knowing she'd fail, then express manufactured disappointment to others. A fallen tree blocking a critical path? Reland would feign surprise that Alara couldn't simply move it, murmuring about the strength a true pack member possessed. A wounded deer needing swift dispatch? He'd lament Alara's inability to deliver the killing blow with fangs and claws, emphasizing the pack's reliance on such skills. These seemingly innocuous incidents, repeated over time, chipped away at the pack's acceptance, fostering resentment and suspicion. He even started questioning her loyalty, subtly suggesting she might be a spy for a rival pack, exploiting their vulnerabilities because she wasn't truly one of them. He'd fabricate stories, twisting Alara's genuine concern for the forest into evidence of her communicating with outsiders, learning their secrets. The pack, already wary of her differences, began to listen, their trust eroding with each carefully placed word. Reland's manipulation was masterful, preying on their fears and insecurities, turning Alara's greatest strengths, her compassion and her unique perspective, into weaknesses. Alara, oblivious to the full extent of Reland's machinations, sensed the growing hostility and desperately tried to bridge the widening gap. She doubled her efforts to prove her worth, immersing herself in the pack's daily life, seeking ways to contribute despite her inability to shift. She learned every medicinal herb in the forest, becoming a skilled healer, tending to the wounded with gentle hands and a soothing touch. She assisted with hunts, tracking prey with her keen human senses, guiding the shifters to the best locations, even though she couldn't participate in the final chase. She volunteered for the most menial tasks, cleaning dens, preparing food, and caring for the young pups, always striving to be useful, to be accepted. She prepared poultices for strained muscles after training, brewed calming teas for sleepless nights, and even mended torn clothes with meticulous care. Small acts of kindness, offered with genuine sincerity, but they were often met with suspicion or indifference. The pack appreciated the help, but they couldn't shake the feeling that she was fundamentally different, an outsider trying to imitate their way of life. Alpha Kale, meanwhile, remained aloof, detached from the growing tension surrounding Alara. He was a strong leader, respected for his strategic mind and his prowess in battle, but he was also distant and preoccupied, consumed by the responsibilities of maintaining the pack's territory and defending them against rivals. He saw Alara as a harmless curiosity, an oddity that the pack's healer had taken under her wing. He didn't actively dislike her, but he didn't actively support her either. He offered no words of encouragement, no gestures of acceptance, leaving Alara to navigate the treacherous currents of pack politics alone. His indifference, though not malicious, was perhaps the most damaging of all, reinforcing Alara's feelings of isolation and fueling Reland's campaign of doubt. It was a silent endorsement of the growing prejudice, a tacit agreement that Alara didn't truly belong. The pack, seeing their alpha's lack of concern, felt justified in their own reservations, solidifying Alara's position as an outsider. Reland's challenge echoed through the clearing, a gauntlet thrown down not just to Alara, but to the very idea of her belonging. A trial of strength. The words hung heavy in the air, thick with the scent of pine and unspoken prejudice. Alara knew what Reland intended. He wasn't just testing her physical prowess, he was testing the pack's loyalty to her, or rather, their lack thereof. The challenge, to venture into the Whisperwood, a notoriously treacherous section of their territory, and retrieve a sprig of moonpetal, a rare herb that bloomed only under the light of the full moon, deep within the wood's most dangerous heart. Moonpetal was prized for its healing properties, a potent remedy for werewolf ailments, and its collection was typically a task undertaken by the strongest shifters. For Alara, a human, it was nearly an impossible task. But to refuse was to admit defeat, to validate Reland's claims that she was a burden, a weakness. A flicker of defiance ignited within her. She might not possess the brute strength of a werewolf, but she had something they often lacked, a deep understanding of the forest, an intimacy born from years of quiet observation and respectful coexistence. She accepted. A collective gasp swept through the pack. Even Kale, the alpha, seemed surprised, his usual detached expression momentarily replaced with something akin to concern. Reland, however, simply smirked, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He envisioned her failure, her humiliation, her inevitable departure. He underestimated her resolve. The days leading up to the trial were a whirlwind of preparation. Alara couldn't rely on physical strength, so she focused on strategy. She studied maps of the Whisperwood, committing every ravine, every stream, every landmark to memory. She consulted with the pack's elder, a wise woman who possessed a wealth of knowledge about the forest's secrets. From her, Alara learned about the Whisperwood's unique dangers, the territorial shadowcats, the venomous whisper vines, the treacherous sinkholes hidden beneath layers of moss. She gathered supplies, a sturdy walking stick, a sharp knife, a waterskin, and a pouch filled with dried berries and nuts. But her most important preparation was mental. She steeled her resolve, reminding herself why she was doing this. Not just to prove Reland wrong, but to prove to herself that she was capable, that she belonged, that she was worthy of the pack's acceptance, even if they didn't see it yet. The morning of the trial dawned gray and overcast, a fitting reflection of the mood within the pack. Alara stood at the edge of the Whisperwood, the entrance shrouded in mist. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. This was it. She stepped into the darkness. The Whisperwood lived up to its name. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets and warnings. Shadows danced in her periphery, playing tricks on her eyes. The terrain was uneven and treacherous, forcing her to navigate carefully, testing her balance and agility. She soon encountered her first obstacle, a swift flowing stream, swollen by recent rains. The rocks were slick with moss, making it nearly impossible to cross without falling. She used her walking stick to test the depth of the water and carefully chose her footing, inching her way across, the icy water numbing her feet. Deeper within the wood, she encountered the Shadowcats. She knew she couldn't fight them head-on. Instead, she remembered the Elder's warnings and used the wind to her advantage, scattering potent herbs known to repel the creatures. The Shadowcats snarled and hissed, their eyes glowing in the darkness, but they kept their distance, allowing her to pass. Her journey was far from over. The Whisperwood held many more secrets, many more dangers. But Alara pressed on, driven by her determination and her unwavering hope. She knew the Moonpital awaited her, and with it, the chance to finally prove her worth. 670 words. Reland, ever the opportunist, saw his chance. He didn't just want Alara to fail, he wanted to ensure she would fail. He subtly altered the trail markers, misdirecting her deeper into the perilous woods. He knew the terrain intimately, every treacherous ravine and hidden sinkhole. He exploited this knowledge to create a deadly trap, a carefully orchestrated accident. Reland, under the guise of pack concern, had scouted the trail earlier that day. What he actually did was trigger a controlled landslide in a narrow passage, knowing Alara would have to pass through it. The displaced rocks and earth partially blocked the path, creating an unstable and dangerous obstacle. He also, with calculated cruelty, left scraps of meat near a known den of razorclaw beasts, creatures notoriously aggressive and territorial. As Alara pressed onward, fueled by adrenaline and determination, she noticed the altered trail markings. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. She was no fool, she knew someone had interfered. She proceeded with extreme caution, her senses on high alert. The forest, once a place of solace, now felt menacing. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted. A low rumble echoed through the trees. Alara realized with horror that she was standing on unstable ground. Before she could react, the landslide gave way, sending her tumbling down a steep embankment amidst a cascade of rocks and dirt. Pain shot through her leg as a sharp stone struck her. Disoriented and bruised, Alara struggled to her feet. The passage was now almost completely blocked, and escape seemed impossible. Just as she was assessing her situation, a guttural growl shattered the silence. The razorclaws, drawn by the scent of the meat, emerged from their den, their eyes burning with predatory hunger. Alara knew she was in dire straits. She had no weapons, and her injured leg severely hampered her mobility. She desperately tried to climb back up the embankment, but the loose earth gave way beneath her hands. The razorclaws were closing in, their snarls growing louder with each step. Thinking quickly, she remembered a small crevice she had noticed earlier. It was barely large enough for her to squeeze through, but it was her only chance. With a surge of adrenaline, she scrambled towards the crevice, ignoring the searing pain in her leg. The razorclaws lunged, their claws tearing at her clothes, but she managed to slip inside just as they reached her. Trapped in the narrow space, Alara was safe from the razorclaws, but far from out of danger. The crevice was cramped and claustrophobic, and her leg throbbed with agonizing pain. She knew she couldn't stay there forever. She needed to find a way out, and she needed to complete the trial, however improbable that seemed now. Summoning her remaining strength, she began to inch her way forward, deeper into the darkness, hoping to find another exit. Hours later, battered, bruised, and barely conscious, Alara stumbled back into the pack clearing. Her clothes were torn, her face was streaked with dirt and blood, and her leg was clearly injured. She had failed to retrieve the herb. She had failed the trial. Reland stepped forward, a smug expression on his face. "Look at her," he sneered, "a pathetic human, barely alive. This is what weakness looks like." Kale, the Alpha, looked at Alara with a mixture of pity and disappointment. He had always felt a certain affection for her, but the pack's sentiment was overwhelmingly against her. He knew what he had to do. With a heavy heart, Kale announced his judgment. "Alara," he said, his voice resonating with sorrow, "you have failed the trial. The pack can no longer afford to carry your burden. You are hereby banished from our lands. You must leave by sunrise." Word count, 670. Alara felt the sting of exile like a physical wound, a burning brand on her soul. The familiar comfort of the pack's territory, the scent of pine and damp earth she had known since infancy, was now forbidden to her. Each step she took away from the only home she had ever known was a fresh wave of agony. Betrayal twisted in her gut, a bitter cocktail of disbelief and sorrow. How could they, the wolves she had tended to, the pups she had played with, cast her out so readily? Reland's venomous words echoed in her mind, poisoning her memories. He had always seen her as different, as less than, and now his insidious campaign had borne its cruel fruit. But beneath the crushing weight of despair, a spark of defiance flickered. She would not succumb. She would not let their judgment define her. Survival was now her only purpose, a burning imperative that pushed her onward, into the shadowed depths of the wilderness. The forest, once a place of solace and wonder, now presented itself as a harsh mistress, unforgiving and indifferent to her plight. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig, was a potential threat. Hunger gnawed at her belly, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. She foraged for berries and roots, relying on the knowledge passed down to her by the pack's healer, a woman who had seen her not as a burden, but as a daughter. The days bled into weeks, a monotonous cycle of searching for food, finding shelter, and warding off wild animals. She learned to read the signs of the forest, to anticipate danger, and to rely on her instincts. The human weakness that Ryland had so scornfully derided became her strength. She moved with a quiet grace, observing the world around her with a keen eye. Her small stature allowed her to navigate the dense undergrowth with ease, and her nimble fingers were adept at crafting tools and traps. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to adapt, to carve out a life for herself in the unforgiving wilderness. As she ventured further from her former pack's territory, she began to hear whispers carried on the wind, tales of a powerful alpha king who ruled over a distant and formidable pack. His name was Lycus, and his reputation was one of both awe and fear. He was said to be a warrior of unmatched strength, a leader who commanded absolute loyalty, and a ruler who showed no mercy to his enemies. Some spoke of his wisdom and justice, while others whispered of his cruelty and ruthlessness. The rumors painted a portrait of a complex and enigmatic figure, a king who inspired both devotion and terror. Alara dismissed these stories as mere folklore, exaggerated tales meant to frighten and impress. Kings and kingdoms were a distant reality, far removed from her solitary existence in the wilderness. Yet, the name Lycus lingered in her mind, a haunting echo in the vast emptiness of the forest. She couldn't shake the feeling that their paths, however improbable, were destined to cross. Little did she know, the scent of fate was already carried on the wind, drawing her ever closer to the Alpha King and the destiny that awaited her. The wilderness held both peril and promise, and Alara, the outcast, was about to step into a world far beyond her wildest imaginings. 668 words. Alara stumbled, her vision blurring at the edges. Each breath was a ragged gasp, offering little relief. The forest floor, usually a comforting carpet of moss and leaves, now felt like a relentless, unforgiving stone. Days had bled into nights since her exile, each one a brutal lesson in survival. Hunger gnawed at her insides, a constant, insistent ache. The meager berries and roots she'd managed to find offered little sustenance, and her strength was rapidly fading. She had become a ghost in the woods she once called home, a shadow flitting between the trees, barely clinging to life. She collapsed against the rough bark of an ancient oak, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like skeletal arms. The world swam around her, the vibrant greens and browns of the forest fading into a muted, indistinct haze. She closed her eyes, welcoming the darkness that threatened to engulf her. It would be a peaceful end, a release from the pain and loneliness that had become her constant companions. She thought of her mother, the pack healer who had raised her with such love and care. Had she failed her? Had she proven too weak, too human to survive in this world of wolves? Just as her consciousness began to slip away, she heard it, the distinct sound of approaching footsteps. Heavy, purposeful strides that spoke of power and confidence. She tried to open her eyes, to focus on the source of the noise, but her eyelids felt like lead weights. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. Were they wolves? Hunters? Or simply figments of her imagination, cruel tricks played by her starving mind? Then, a presence loomed over her, blocking out the little light that filtered through the canopy. She could feel the intensity of their gaze, a palpable weight that pressed down on her. A deep voice, resonant and commanding, cut through the fog in her mind. It spoke words she couldn't quite decipher, but the tone was unmistakable: authority, concern, and something else she couldn't quite place. Lycus, Alpha King of the Northern Peaks Pack, surveyed the scene before him with a practiced eye. He and his hunting party had been tracking a rogue bear for days, venturing deep into territory unfamiliar to them. He was a formidable figure, his broad shoulders and muscular frame radiating strength. His face, etched with the harsh realities of leadership, held a stern expression, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. He exuded power, the very air around him crackling with unspoken command. He was a leader, a warrior, a king. He stopped abruptly, his senses heightened. Something was amiss. It wasn't the scent of the bear that had drawn him here, but something else entirely, a faint, unfamiliar fragrance that tickled his nostrils and sent a jolt of awareness through him. It was a delicate, floral scent, laced with the earthy aroma of the forest floor, unlike anything he had ever encountered. He followed the scent, his hunting party trailing behind him, until he came upon a clearing. There, lying at the base of an ancient oak, was a young woman. She was pale and emaciated, Her clothes torn and dirty, but even in her weakened state, he could see a certain beauty in her features. Her hair, a tangled mass of brown, framed a delicate face with high cheekbones and a softly curved mouth. But it was her scent that truly captivated him. It was intoxicating, irresistible. He had heard tales of true mates, of the one destined soul that would complete a werewolf's existence, but he had dismissed them as mere folklore. Now, standing before this frail human girl, he knew the stories were true. The scent, undeniable and overwhelming, confirmed it. This human, on the brink of death, was his true mate. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him breathless and stunned. His eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. She was clearly near death, starved and exhausted. He knelt beside her, his large hand hovering over her face, hesitant to touch her. He had never felt such a powerful connection to another being, such a fierce protectiveness. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he would do anything to save her. 667 words. Lycus, a king hardened by battles and burdened by responsibility, found himself captivated. He, who had known only the brutal realities of power and the constant threat of war, was now undeniably drawn to a fragile human he had found on the brink of death. He watched as his healers, initially hesitant, worked diligently to mend Alara's wounds, their faces betraying a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He ignored the whispers that rippled through his hunting party, the thinly veiled disapproval of their concern for a human, a creature considered weak and insignificant. He had given the order, and his word was law. Alara, upon regaining consciousness, found herself in surroundings far removed from the familiar forest she had known. Soft furs replaced the hard ground, and gentle hands tended to her injuries instead of the harsh indifference of the wilderness. Confusion clouded her eyes as she looked around the spacious chamber, its walls adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of werewolves in their powerful, shifted forms. The scent of pine and wood smoke filled the air, a comforting reminder of the forest, yet tinged with an unfamiliar, musky aroma that hinted at the presence of the powerful beings who inhabited this place. Lycus observed her from a shadowed corner, his presence a silent weight in the room. He saw the wariness in her gaze, the subtle flinch as his eyes met hers. He knew he must tread carefully. He was a king, accustomed to command and obedience, but he sensed that Alara was not one to be easily swayed. She possessed a quiet strength, a resilience that had allowed her to survive in the unforgiving wilderness, a quality he admired. Days turned into weeks as Alara slowly recovered. She was treated with a cautious respect by Lycus' pack, an acknowledgement of the king's favor, but also a clear indication of their underlying distrust. She spent her days exploring the castle, observing the intricate social dynamics of the werewolf court. She saw the power struggles, the alliances and betrayals, the constant jockeying for position that characterized their society. She realized that Lycus was not just a powerful warrior, but also a shrewd politician, constantly navigating the treacherous currents of his own court. Lycus found himself spending more and more time in Alara's company. He would sit with her in the evenings, sharing stories of his past, of battles fought and territories won. He spoke of the responsibilities of leadership, the burden of protecting his pack. He found himself revealing aspects of himself that he had never shared with anyone before, a vulnerability that surprised even him. He was drawn to her gentle nature, her unwavering kindness, her ability to see the good in even the most hardened warriors. He saw in her a purity of spirit, a lack of ambition, that was a refreshing contrast to the cutthroat world he inhabited. He knew that his growing attachment to Alara was dangerous. His pack would never accept a human mate, especially one as seemingly ordinary as Alara. They would see it as a sign of weakness, a betrayal of their traditions. But he could not deny the pull he felt towards her, the undeniable connection that resonated deep within his soul. He was the Alpha King, and he had always forged his own path, defied expectations, and challenged the status quo. Perhaps, he thought, he could do so once again. The question that lingered was, would Alara want to stand by his side? The king's council buzzed with a low, almost feral energy. Lycus faced a wall of disapproval, a sea of furrowed brows and tightly clenched fists. His advisors, the most seasoned and respected wolves in his pack, were united in their opposition. At the forefront stood his beta, a towering brute named Forlock, whose loyalty had always been unquestioned, until now. Forlock's voice, when he finally spoke, was a low growl that resonated through the chamber. He questioned Lycus's judgment, his leadership, his very sanity, for choosing a human as his mate. He argued that it was an insult to their ancestors, a betrayal of their traditions, a weakening of their bloodline. Lycus stood firm, his own power radiating outward, a silent declaration of his authority. He listened patiently to their grievances, acknowledging their concerns, but refusing to yield. He knew that his decision was unprecedented, that it challenged the very foundation of their society. But he also knew that Alara was his true mate, the one destined to stand by his side, and he would not sacrifice their bond for the sake of tradition. He saw beyond the superficial differences, beyond the outdated prejudices, and recognized the strength and compassion that resided within her. Meanwhile, Alara found herself an observer in this strange and dangerous court. She was like a lamb amongst wolves, surrounded by powerful, intimidating creatures who saw her as a threat, an anomaly, an outsider. She watched as Lycus defended her, his voice echoing with a fierce protectiveness that both warmed her heart and filled her with anxiety. She realized the enormity of the challenge they faced, the deep-seated prejudices that she would have to overcome. She understood that her presence in the pack was not just a matter of personal acceptance, but a political battleground, a symbol of change and upheaval. Despite the overwhelming odds, Alara refused to be intimidated. She held her head high, her gaze steady, her spirit unbroken. She may not have been a werewolf, but she possessed a strength of her own, a resilience forged in the fires of adversity. She knew that she could offer Lycus something that no werewolf could, a different perspective, a human heart, a connection to the world beyond their pack. In the quiet moments they shared, away from the prying eyes of the court, Alara and Lycus began to forge a deeper bond. He was drawn to her genuine nature, her unwavering kindness, her fierce determination. She, in turn, was drawn to his strength, his hidden vulnerability, his unwavering loyalty. She saw beneath the powerful Alpha King to the man within, a man burdened by responsibility, a man searching for connection, a man who needed her as much as she needed him. Their differences, once a source of conflict, became a source of strength, a testament to the power of love to transcend all boundaries. They were an unlikely pair, a human and a werewolf, but they were bound by a connection that defied logic and reason, a connection that had the potential to change the very fabric of their world. As they stood together, facing the challenges ahead, they knew that they were not just fighting for their love, but for a future where differences were celebrated, and prejudices were cast aside. 667 words. The pack's elders, steeped in generations of tradition, saw Lycus's affection for Alara as a dangerous deviation from the established order. Their wizened faces, etched with the history of countless shifts and pack wars, reflected deep disapproval. They gathered in the ancient council chamber, the air thick with the scent of pine and aged wolf fur, ready to voice their concerns. The flickering torchlight cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, amplifying the gravity of the situation. They spoke of ancient laws, etched into stone tablets and passed down through oral tradition, laws that explicitly forbade interspecies mating. These laws, they argued, were not mere suggestions, they were the foundation of their society, the very bedrock upon which their strength and unity were built. To disregard them would be to invite chaos and destruction. They feared a weakening of the werewolf bloodline, a dilution of their primal power. They envisioned future generations of werewolves, less potent, less connected to the moon, vulnerable to the threats that lurked in the shadows. They painted vivid pictures of misfortune and plagues, claiming that the ancient spirits would be angered by such a transgression. Interbreeding with humans, they insisted, would open the door to unforeseen vulnerabilities, diseases, and a loss of the unique gifts that defined them as werewolves. They spoke of the purity of the blood, the sacredness of the shift, the importance of maintaining their distinct identity. They warned of the dangers of succumbing to emotions, of allowing sentimentality to cloud their judgment. Lycus listened patiently, his expression unreadable, his powerful frame radiating an aura of quiet strength. He understood their concerns, respected their traditions, but he could not deny the undeniable pull he felt towards Alara. Torn between the weight of tradition and the fierce, unwavering love that had blossomed in his heart, Lycus found himself at a crossroads. He knew that challenging the ancient laws would be a risky move, one that could fracture his pack and jeopardize his reign. But he also knew that he could not betray his own heart, could not deny the truth that resonated within his soul. He rose to his full height, his voice echoing through the chamber, silencing the murmurs of dissent. He spoke of the power of love, its ability to transcend boundaries and heal wounds. He argued that Alara's worth was not defined by her species, but by her character, her kindness, and her unwavering spirit. He pointed to her compassion, her healing skills, her deep connection to the forest, qualities that had already proven invaluable to the pack. He declared that love was not a weakness, but a strength, a force that could unite them, make them stronger, and lead them to a brighter future. He acknowledged the risks, but he insisted that the rewards were worth the fight. He spoke of a new era, an era of acceptance and understanding, where differences were celebrated, not feared. His words, infused with passion and conviction, resonated with some members of the pack, those who had witnessed Alara's selfless acts and recognized her inherent goodness. but his decision also ignited a firestorm of opposition. The pack divided, some fiercely loyal to their alpha, willing to embrace change, while others remained steadfast in their adherence to tradition, fearing the unknown consequences of Lycus's choice. Whispers of rebellion began to circulate, fueled by fear and prejudice. The elders, sensing their authority threatened, rallied their supporters, preparing to challenge Lycus's rule. The stage was set for a clash of ideologies, a battle for the very soul of the pack. The ancient laws, once unquestioned, were now a battleground, a symbol of the deep divisions that threatened to tear the pack apart. The future hung in the balance, dependent on Lycus's ability to unite his people and persuade them to embrace a new vision, a vision where love and acceptance triumphed over fear and prejudice. 667 words. Lycus knew the trial was inevitable. The ancient laws, etched in the very stones of the kingdom's foundation, demanded it. To choose a human as his mate, to defy centuries of tradition, required him to prove his worth, not just as a king, but as a werewolf. It was a gauntlet designed to break the will of any but the strongest, a series of challenges that would test his strength, his cunning, and his leadership. The elders, their faces grim and etched with disapproval, had laid out the terms with cold precision. He would face the trials of the wolf, the mind, and the heart. Alara watched from the sidelines, her heart a trapped bird in her chest. Each challenge was more daunting than the last, each hurdle a potential death sentence for the man she loved. She saw the doubt in the eyes of the pack, the whispers that questioned Lycus' judgment, his sanity even. The weight of her human existence pressed down on her, the knowledge that she was the catalyst for this ordeal. She longed to intervene, to shield him from the scorn and the danger, but knew that her role was to stand firm, to be the unwavering beacon that guided him through the darkness. Her fear was a constant companion, gnawing at her resolve, but she refused to let it consume her. She had to believe in Lycus, in his strength, in his love for her. The first trial, the trial of the wolf, was a brutal test of physical prowess. Lycus had to navigate a treacherous mountain pass, battling the elements and the ferocious beasts that roamed its slopes. He had to rely on his instincts, his strength, and his years of training to survive. Alara watched as he transformed, his powerful wolf form a blur of gray against the stark landscape. She saw him face down a monstrous bear, his fangs bared in a silent snarl, his muscles straining with effort. She saw him leap across impossible chasms, his agility defying gravity. Each successful maneuver was a victory, a testament to his unwavering determination. The second trial, the trial of the mind, was a test of his intellect and his leadership. He was presented with a series of riddles and strategic puzzles, each designed to challenge his wit and his ability to make difficult decisions under pressure. He had to navigate treacherous political landscapes, mediating disputes between warring factions and forging alliances with rival packs. Alara watched as he engaged in complex negotiations, his words carefully chosen, his logic impeccable. She saw him outsmart cunning adversaries, his intelligence a weapon as formidable as his strength. She knew that this trial was just as important as the first, for a king must be wise as well as strong. The final trial, the trial of the heart, was the most challenging of all. He was forced to confront his deepest fears and his most painful memories. He had to prove that his love for Alara was genuine, that it could withstand the pressures of tradition and the prejudices of his pack. He was presented with illusions, temptations designed to sway him from his chosen path. Alara watched, her breath caught in her throat, as he faced these demons, his resolve unwavering. She saw him reject the allure of power, the promise of an easier life. She knew, in that moment, that his love for her was true, that it was a force that could conquer anything. He spoke of their connection, a bond that transcended species and challenged ancient laws, his voice resonating with conviction and passion. The pack listened, some with skepticism, others with dawning understanding. Lycus had faced the trials, and he had emerged victorious. He had proven his worth, not just as a king, but as a man who dared to love without boundaries. He had earned the right to choose his own mate, and in doing so, he had begun to change the very fabric of their world. 667 words. Lycus's victory in the trial resonated through the pack, a tremor of acceptance shaking the foundations of their long-held prejudices. Some, witnessing his strength and unwavering determination, offered grudging respect, their eyes reflecting a newfound understanding, perhaps even a flicker of admiration for the human woman who inspired such devotion. Yet, this acceptance was far from universal. A deep-seated resistance simmered beneath the surface, fueled by ancient traditions and personal ambition. At the heart of this discontent lay a disgruntled beta, a powerful werewolf named Forlock, who had long coveted Lycus's position as alpha. He saw Alara not as a symbol of unity, but as a threat, a weakness that could be exploited to seize control. Forlock, a hulking figure with eyes like chips of ice, had always been a staunch traditionalist. He believed in the purity of the werewolf bloodline and saw Alara's presence as a contamination, a dangerous deviation from the natural order. He whispered insidious doubts into the ears of the pack, preying on their fears and insecurities. He spoke of the ancient prophecies, foretelling doom and destruction if a human were to sit beside the Alpha King. His words, like venom, slowly poisoned the minds of those already hesitant to accept Alara, creating a growing undercurrent of rebellion. Alara, despite the newfound acceptance from some, felt the chilling presence of Forlock's animosity. She sensed the subtle shifts in the pack's dynamic, the furtive glances, the hushed whispers that followed her every move. Her human senses, honed by years of living in the wild, picked up on the subtle cues of impending danger. She saw the way Forlock's loyalists clustered together, their expressions dark and brooding, their eyes filled with a simmering resentment. She knew that Forlock was not simply harboring discontent, he was actively plotting, gathering support for a challenge to Lycus's authority. Driven by a fierce loyalty to Lycus and a growing sense of responsibility for the pack's well-being, Alara resolved to act. She began to observe Forlock and his followers, carefully studying their movements, their habits, their weaknesses. She used her knowledge of human psychology to anticipate their plans, understanding that their rebellion would likely begin with manipulation and deceit. She knew that Forlock would try to turn the pack against Lycus, painting him as a weak leader, blinded by his affection for a human. One evening, while walking through the moonlit forest, Alara overheard a hushed conversation between Forlock and one of his loyalists. They spoke of a plan to undermine Lycus's authority, to spread rumors of his failing health, and to stage a series of incidents that would make him appear incompetent and weak. Alara realized that Forlock's rebellion was not just a threat to Lycus, but a threat to the entire pack, a descent into chaos and division. She knew she had to warn Lycus, to expose Forlock's treachery before it was too late. She raced back to the castle, her heart pounding with a sense of urgency, knowing that the fate of the pack rested on her shoulders. She found Lycus in his study, poring over maps and strategies. He looked up, his eyes filled with concern as he saw the fear in her face. Alara wasted no time, relaying everything she had overheard, her voice trembling with emotion. Lycus listened intently, his expression growing darker with each word. He knew that Forlock was ambitious, but he had never suspected him of such blatant treachery. He thanked Alara for her courage and her loyalty, promising to take swift action to protect the pack from Forlock's machinations. The king knew a storm was brewing, a storm that threatened to tear his kingdom apart, and Alara's warning was the first clap of thunder. 667 words. The Beta launched his attack under the cover of a moonless night, a calculated move designed to sow maximum confusion and fear. His loyalists, a mix of ambitious warriors and those steeped in old prejudices, surged through the pack lands, their howls a chilling prelude to the bloodshed that was to follow. Homes were set ablaze, the orange flames licking at the wooden structures, casting long, dancing shadows that amplified the chaos. The air filled with the acrid smell of smoke and the metallic tang of blood. The Beta's strategy was simple: overwhelm the loyalists through sheer force and exploit the existing divisions to shatter Lycus's authority. Alara, despite her inherent lack of physical strength compared to the werewolves, found an unexpected wellspring of courage. She knew she couldn't shift, couldn't match their raw power, but she possessed something they lacked: a human's resourcefulness and understanding of tactics. She moved through the pandemonium, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. Remembering her training from the pack's healer, she quickly set up makeshift aid stations, tending to the wounded with practiced hands. She used her knowledge of herbs to create potent poultices and bandages, staunching the flow of blood and easing their pain. She directed those who could still fight, guiding them to strategic positions to defend against the onslaught. Seeing a group of attackers attempting to flank the main defense, Alara grabbed a handful of potent sleep-inducing herbs she had gathered. With surprising accuracy, she hurled them into the faces of the oncoming werewolves. The herbs, when inhaled, caused immediate disorientation and drowsiness, effectively neutralizing the threat. She knew it was a temporary measure, but it bought the defenders precious time. She moved swiftly between areas, a whirlwind of activity, applying her human ingenuity to counter the werewolves' brute force. Meanwhile, Lycus, alerted to the treachery, roared his fury to the heavens. His transformation was instantaneous, his massive wolf form radiating power and righteous anger. He tore through the ranks of the rebels, his teeth and claws a blur of lethal efficiency. Each strike was precise, each movement calculated to disable rather than kill. He wanted to end the rebellion, not decimate his own pack. But the Beta's forces were numerous, and they fought with a desperate fervor, knowing that their lives, and their twisted ambitions, depended on victory. The battle raged, a maelstrom of fur, blood, and steel. Lycus, recognizing the strategic importance of the pack's ancient oak, a sacred meeting place and a symbol of their unity, focused his efforts on securing it. He knew that if the rebels managed to desecrate the oak, it would be a devastating blow to the pack's morale. As he fought his way towards the oak, he saw Alara, surrounded by a group of rebels, her face streaked with dirt and blood, yet her eyes blazing with defiance. She was using a combination of agility and herbal concoctions to fend off her attackers, but it was clear she was tiring. A surge of protectiveness, a primal instinct to defend his mate, coursed through Lycus. He unleashed a deafening roar, a sound that shook the very foundations of the forest, and charged towards Alara, a force of nature unleashed. Word count, 667. Lycus confronted the Beta in a final, climactic battle. The air crackled with raw power, the ground trembling beneath their feet as they circled each other, each movement deliberate, each gaze filled with animosity. The Beta, whose name was Ronan, snarled, his eyes burning with a malevolent fire, fueled by years of suppressed ambition and simmering resentment. He lunged first, a whirlwind of claws and teeth, aiming to tear Lycus apart. Lycus met the attack head-on, his own power a shield and a weapon. He parried Ronan's blows with calculated precision, his movements fluid and graceful despite the ferocity of the fight. Each strike was a testament to his years of training, each block a display of his unwavering resolve. The forest around them became a blur of motion, trees splintering, earth churning as the two alphas clashed. The battle raged on, a dance of death under the pale moonlight. Ronan fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his attacks becoming increasingly reckless, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and hatred. Lycus, though weary, remained composed, his focus unwavering. He knew that the fate of his pack, the future of his kingdom, rested on his shoulders. He had to win, not just for himself, but for Alara, for the possibility of a world where love could conquer prejudice. He saw in Ronan's eyes the darkness that threatened to consume them all, the rigid adherence to tradition that stifled growth and understanding. He fought not just against Ronan, but against that darkness itself. Alara, watching from the sidelines, her heart pounding in her chest, could barely breathe. She knew she was vulnerable, a human amidst werewolves, but she couldn't stand idly by while Lycus fought for their future. She had to do something, anything, to help him. Spotting an opening, a moment where Ronan faltered, she raced forward, grabbing a fallen branch and slamming it against Ronan's leg. It was a desperate move, a human act of defiance against overwhelming power. Ronan roared in pain and fury, momentarily distracted. That instant of distraction proved to be the turning point. Lycus seized the opportunity, unleashing a surge of power that sent Ronan flying. Ronan crashed against a tree, his body broken and bleeding. He struggled to rise, his eyes filled with disbelief and defeat. Seeing Lycus's struggle, Alara's sacrifice, ignited a fire within him, a protective instinct so fierce it burned away the last vestiges of doubt and restraint. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he would do anything to protect her, even sacrifice his own life. But as Ronan fell, a stray shard of wood, propelled by the force of the impact, hurtled towards Lycus. Alara, reacting instinctively, threw herself in front of him, intercepting the shard. A gasp escaped her lips as the wood pierced her side. She crumpled to the ground, her vision blurring, a crimson stain spreading across her tunic. Lycus roared in anguish, rushing to her side. He cradled her in his arms, his eyes filled with horror and despair. Lycus, fueled by grief and rage, unleashed his remaining power, ending the rebellion and securing his reign. He barely registered the cheers of his pack, the surrender of the remaining rebels. His entire world had narrowed to the woman in his arms, the woman who had sacrificed herself for him. The battle was won, but at a terrible cost. 667. Alara teetered on the precipice between worlds, her life hanging by a thread. The Beta's treachery had left her gravely wounded, a testament to her selfless act of protecting Lycus. The forest held its breath, the wind whispering through the leaves like a mournful dirge. Lycus, his heart a shattered echo of its former strength, refused to leave her side. He summoned the most skilled healers from across the kingdom, their faces etched with worry as they worked tirelessly to mend her broken body. Potions bubbled, incantations filled the air, and the scent of herbs mingled with the metallic tang of blood. But even their combined efforts seemed futile. Alara's spirit flickered like a dying ember, threatening to extinguish entirely. Lycus, desperate, knelt beside her, his large hand gently cradling her small one. He poured his own life force into her, a risky move that threatened to weaken him, but he cared not for his own well-being. Alara was his mate, his anchor, the very reason for his existence. He would gladly sacrifice everything to save her. Days blurred into nights, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. The pack watched and waited, their initial hostility replaced by a growing respect for the human girl who had risked everything for their king. They saw Lycus's devotion, his unwavering faith in Alara's strength, and they began to understand the depth of their bond. The rebellion, though devastating, had inadvertently revealed the truth, that love knew no boundaries, that courage resided not in brute force but in the willingness to sacrifice oneself for another. Slowly, miraculously, Alara began to heal. The color returned to her cheeks, her breathing deepened, and her eyes fluttered open. She looked at Lycus, a faint smile gracing her lips. "You came back," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Lycus's heart soared with relief. He had never felt such profound joy, such unadulterated love. He knew, in that moment, that their bond was unbreakable, that they were destined to be together. The pack's transformation was equally remarkable. The rebellion had shaken them to their core, forcing them to confront their prejudices and reassess their values. They saw the devastation that hatred and fear could wrought, and they vowed to create a more tolerant and compassionate society. They approached Alara, offering apologies and words of gratitude. They acknowledged her bravery, her kindness, and her unwavering loyalty to Lycus and the pack. Alara, ever forgiving, accepted their apologies with grace. She understood that change took time, that old habits died hard. But she also believed in the power of love and understanding to heal even the deepest wounds. She knew that together, she and Lycus could build a better future for the werewolf kingdom, a future where differences were celebrated, and where everyone was treated with respect and dignity. The seeds of a new era had been sown, watered by sacrifice and nurtured by love. The path ahead would not be easy, but they would face it together, united in their commitment to creating a world free from prejudice and filled with hope. The kingdom was ready to accept her. The kingdom rejoiced. The day had finally arrived, a day many thought impossible, a day that shattered ancient prejudices and heralded a new dawn. The air crackled with anticipation, not of fear and suspicion, but of joyous celebration. Banners of intertwined wolf and human symbols fluttered in the breeze, a testament to the union about to take place. Flowers bloomed in vibrant hues, their fragrance mingling with the scent of pine and earth, creating an intoxicating aroma that filled the senses. Lycus, the Alpha King, stood tall and proud, his eyes radiating a love that transcended the boundaries of species. He wore a tunic woven with silver threads, a gift from the human artisans who had come to admire and respect him. He adjusted his stance, a small smile gracing his lips as he awaited the arrival of his bride. Alara, the human girl who had captured the heart of the Alpha King, walked slowly down the aisle, her steps measured and graceful. She wore a gown of pure white, embroidered with delicate wildflowers, a symbol of her connection to the forest and her gentle spirit. Sunlight streamed through the canopy, illuminating her face and casting a halo around her head. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of nervousness and excitement, met Lycus' gaze, and a wave of reassurance washed over her. She was no longer the outcast, the unwanted, the weak human. She was the Alpha's mate, the queen, the woman who had shown them all the true meaning of love and acceptance. The ceremony was a blend of werewolf and human traditions, a testament to their commitment to honoring both cultures. The pack's shaman, a wise and ancient wolf, spoke of the importance of unity and the strength that came from embracing diversity. A human priestess, with gentle eyes and a soothing voice, spoke of the power of love to conquer all. Lycus and Alara exchanged vows, their voices clear and strong, promising to rule with compassion, justice, and unwavering devotion to each other. They pledged to protect their kingdom from all threats, both internal and external, and to foster an environment of peace and understanding. As they spoke their vows, a hush fell over the crowd. Even the most skeptical members of the pack felt a stirring in their hearts, a sense of hope for the future. They witnessed the genuine love between Lycus and Alara, and they knew that this union was not just a political alliance, but a true connection of souls. Finally, the moment arrived. Lycus and Alara were officially wed, husband and wife, Alpha King and his queen. A roar of approval erupted from the crowd, shaking the very foundations of the forest. The celebration continued long into the night, with music, dancing, and feasting. Werewolves and humans mingled freely, sharing stories and laughter, united in their joy and their hope for the future. Lycus and Alara stood together on the balcony of their castle, overlooking their kingdom. The moon bathed the land in its silvery glow, casting long shadows and creating an ethereal beauty. They held each other close, their hearts filled with gratitude and love. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would still be challenges to overcome and prejudices to fight. But they were confident that, together, they could face anything. "We will rule with compassion," Alara said softly, her voice filled with determination. And we will ensure that everyone in our kingdom feels safe and valued. We will build a world where love knows no boundaries, Lycus added, his voice strong and resolute. A world where differences are celebrated, not feared. Their love was a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. It was a testament to the power of the human heart and the strength of the werewolf spirit. It was a promise of peace, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that anything is possible when love leads the way. The Alpha King had found his true mate, and together, they would create a kingdom where everyone could thrive. And if you enjoyed this tale of love, courage, and breaking boundaries, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Now, why not check out The Dragon's Bride, a forbidden love story? It's another story about unexpected love and overcoming adversity. Click the link on the screen to watch now.